Hey guys, today I wanted to show you something that I built here a couple years ago. This is an air dryer I built back in August of 2020, and it's a relatively simple setup. All it really is a heat exchanger and a small reservoir drip leg here with the drain, and then I have a squirrel cage fan behind it to blow air through the heat exchanger. And what that does is that takes the hot air out of the compressor and cools it off, and cooler air can't hold as much moisture as hot air, so the moisture condenses out. Same principle as whenever damp air hits a glass of ice water, it condenses on the side and drips down. Basically the same here, only it's a closed system. This heat exchanger I got from Zorro Tools. This isn't a typical, I know it looks like an automotive radiator, but it's not. It's much heavier duty. It can actually withstand 250 psi. It's capable of 100 CFM. That's a lot more than I use here at the shop, but in case I upgrade, the amount of cabinets I have or the compressor size along with the cabinets, I didn't want to have to make a lot of changes in the future. So anyway, they do make smaller units than this that are a little bit cheaper, but I just opted for that for the reasons I told you. So I've been using this now for a couple years. It's now August of 2022, and since then I've had absolutely no issues with water in any of the lines in my shop. It's worked out really well. Heat exchangers aren't cheap, but they're still a lot cheaper than if you would spend on, say, a refrigerated air dryer. Some people will run copper pipe, zigzag it along a wall with a drain at the bottom. I didn't do that because I don't have very much wall space. There's a huge lathe sitting here, and I really couldn't access a drain that way. So I opted for this. It's compact, a lot of capacity, and it works. I was using a desiccant air dryer before that used silica gel, and it worked, but it needed to be changed a lot. And I also had smaller air and moisture traps right at the cabinet, and they do work pretty well. When it's really humid, though, they do let some moisture through, unfortunately. So I opted for just one solution for the entire shop, since I have a couple different cabinets. So you see, I have a squirrel cage fan here. Unfortunately, the outlet of the fan is much smaller than the dimensions of the heat exchanger here. The length times the width is much smaller in the back. So what I did is I built a box. You see the wooden box behind there, and it's just not a hollow box. It's actually made out of angled pieces of 2x4 I cut on the table saw, and that helps direct the airflow. It makes the airflow divergent. In other words, it expands the airflow so it hits more of the surface area. To put it simply, I didn't want the small outlet of the air just to go right through the center here. I wanted to hit all of the cooling fins, and as you can see from the white areas here, that's dust. You see it hits it pretty consistently. There's really no dead spots in this. How this works is I just have a small rocker switch here that I was using when I first made it. Whenever you turn that on, it forces the air through and cools it off. If you're not using much air, you don't really even need to use the fan. The squirrel cage fan is pretty high efficiency. It moves a lot of air in it without much noise at all. I'll turn it on here. I actually have been using a switched outlet instead of that rocker switch because it's easier to access. So I keep this right by my compressor here, and I'll switch it on and show you what the noise level. And as you can tell, it's quite silent. In fact, whenever you have the other machines running, you really can't hear it at all. So it is a very silent setup here. So that's pretty much it. You can see up here I have a manifold. I have 1-inch pipe that runs up to a manifold that goes to different machines I have here. And of course there's my CFM gauge I use for testing my blasting gun air jets. Pretty simple here. You got a 1-inch line coming from the compressor. It comes through, and then I have the outlet at the lowest point, of course, so the water can drain. So I have this heat exchanger oriented in the horizontal position. For a reason. There's a slightly smaller inner diameter inside that outlet. There's a little flange up inside where they machined it, and if you would place this in the vertical position, what would happen is that little flange would dam up drain water along this edge, because this edge would actually be down at the bottom, It wouldn't allow complete drainage of that water, and eventually it would corrode and rot. So I figured it would be a good idea to mount it in this orientation and then slant this end, have this slightly lower on this end so it gets complete drainage. It hasn't been an issue. It's only been 2 years, but still, I've had no issues so far. Now in the drain right here, you see I have this sight glass made out of, it's actually flexible PVC tubing. It's braided, and I had to do that to withstand the higher pressures from the compressor. I wanted to use clear tubing, but I couldn't find anything that would withstand the higher pressure. Unfortunately, braided tubing is kind of difficult to see through, so it didn't work all that great from the beginning, but I was able to determine water levels. You can see how it's kind of stained, has like a gradient, dark to light as it goes up. It pretty much stops right there in the middle. If I was to build another one of these, I wouldn't worry about the sight glass, because as long as you drain this once a day, it's not going to be an issue. The top part of the construction here, it's actually not straight through. Even though the inlet and outlet is in line, it doesn't flow straight through, because I didn't want any kind of condensed water just to blow through right into the regulator. Of course it would do that. So what I did is I put a vertical plate here, welded it in. It goes down to about an inch above the top of that sight glass. And what that does is, of course, the moist air comes in and the water droplets, and they get diverted down here where they fall off the edge of that divider plate, and then do a U-turn and come back up. And that keeps at least the vast majority of the droplets from making it into the rest of the line. Like I said, I have no issues with line water whatsoever at this point. I left my moisture traps on the machines, but whenever you open them up under pressure, nothing comes out. Used to be I had to drain them about every 45 minutes on a humid day in the summertime. Now nothing comes out. It just works that well. So even for powder coating on a humid day, this works. I got a little air dryer on my powder coating gun, but they're quite limited actually. This system, along with that, I can actually powder coat parts with absolutely no issues on a humid day. It's just something, if you want to build one of these, you have moisture problems, this will take care of it. It won't take the dew point down, or the humidity down to like where a refrigerated air dryer would, but it's a much cheaper way of going about it. And I don't really trust the ultra cheap refrigerated air dryers either that you see. I just don't, well, I can't say that they're not reliable because I don't have one, but anything that cheap, you have to wonder about the longevity. So this is just an idea in case you guys want to do something like this. It's relatively straightforward. I'm going to expand on this a little bit more in this video. I'm going to show a little bit more about the construction of each component, so it'll give you an idea of how to build one of these things. It's not comprehensive, but it'll give you an idea at least how I put this together and fabricated it. I was just looking at this a little bit more and noticing some of the construction which I like on it. It's a relatively heavy unit, so I have to get some of the other parts here together to put this together. So this is the blower that is going to be used. I think it's 400 or 500 CFM. It has 2 different speeds. And I wanted something with a rectangular output on it like this, being that the heat exchanger is rectangular. That looks pretty nice. Squirrel cage fan. The only thing, I don't know if this has it or not, that I do not like about the new AC motors that you get with the old ones is usually you'll have an oil fitting on them. So I got the plug turned down, fairly loose fit. Let's go ahead and check the trap now and see how much water comes out. This is from blasting yesterday. I have about 3.5 hours of log time. Now that's between the dry blaster and the wet blaster. Let's take a closer look at this sight tube. So it's a little bit more difficult to see because of the white threads inside, but you can still see a water line here. It's relatively clear, more clear than what I figured it would be actually. But here's a water line right here. It changes the refraction just a little bit of the light going through it, and you can see a water line right here. And up here it's a little bit more, looks a little bit more opaque. Down here it looks a little bit clearer. Now I have a tube here, being this is just condensed water, it goes to my drain. But I'm going to take this off now just for demonstration to collect it in a graduated container here. Let's see how much we collected over 3 hours. Now I got about 45 psi on the line right now, so this is going to come up pretty strong. It's rusted at the bottom. Okay, that's kind of nasty. But I figured it was going to be rusted at the bottom, being this thing's steel. I painted part of the inside, but I didn't get quite to the bottom. Anyway, here is our final level. We got about approximately 350 milliliters out of that. You might as well say about 1/3 of a quart. It's close to a quart, not exact, but the quart's at the top right here, and this is one liter, and this is 1 quart. So we got about a little over 1/3 of a quart, I guess. Anyway, it collected a lot of water. It's 3 hours of blasting time. Otherwise, that would have been in the blaster or in my moisture traps. I drained the traps last night, or attempted to drain the water traps. Absolutely nothing came out. No mist, no spray, no nothing, which is completely different than what I'm used to. So you can see there's a lot of rust and sediment in that. But it's doing exactly what it's supposed to do.